Hello and welcome to the CIBSE West Midlands Region vlog and podcast. My name is Joss Brownlee and I'm joined today by Geoff Nash. Geoff, welcome. Great to have you here today.
It's a pleasure. It's all right.
Excellent. Geoff started out as a technical apprentice for Haden Young, which is now known as Balfour Beatty. He went to Garratts Green College on day release and became a designer and estimator at Crown House. Then he became a technical officer at the Property Services Agency. Then he moved into consultancy with NDC, Royal Mail, White Young Green, EC Harris, Arcadis, FHPESS, and is currently a director of his own M&E consultancy, TDD Consult. A year after starting the business, TDD have just published their first yearly results and accounts. So it's been quite a ride for the past year, wouldn't you say, Geoff?
Yeah, it's quite a change. I've always, prior to now, I've always been PAY employed, never self-employed or anything. So yeah, it's been different, very different.
And around the time of COVID as well, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's what you speak to anybody. You spoke to Alistair before now, and it was something that drove everybody. I dare say it's been quite a sea change for people at work. You were, well, I mean, people were isolated, weren't they? But you were sort of isolated work-wise, but obviously you were on Teams, you were on Zoom, you were doing this, you were doing CPD, and effectively you worked totally remotely. And as a team, there was 3 of us for the Birmingham office, and we just felt that we were servicing our clients, we were finding new clients, we were giving them the right service, there were no complaints, we were getting paid. So we just thought, well, perhaps we should do our own thing here. So that's what we decided to do. Yeah.
No looking back?
No. No.
So that's
not every day's an easy day, obviously. I mean, you've got to manage work. It always comes in lumps and bumps, so you have to try and manage that workload. But yeah, no looking back.
So you and one M, one E, or you and one PH?
Yeah, we're both a mix of M&E. I'd say we are all sort of started out as mechanical, but we've all got a level of knowledge electrically. Okay. Paul and Nick who work with me, they're both members of the MIET. So
okay.
Yeah.
And it's an M&E consultants, mechanical and electrical consultants?
It is, yeah. I mean, we are a conventional consultant, but nevertheless we spend a lot of our time being small. We do a lot of our time doing professional reports, which includes pre-acquisitions, vendors surveys, general technical due diligence, and dilapidations work, which dilapidations is a field all on its own. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it's sort of, although it's got an engineer involvement, it's led in law effectively. So you're sort of led by what the solicitors say and what the lease says.
Okay. Just for projects in the West Midlands or further afield as well?
No, further afield. We'll go pretty much anywhere in the UK. So yeah, we do have to sort of spread our wings a bit, but that's okay.
Any interesting or innovative projects here in the West Midlands region?
Yeah, I wouldn't say they're innovative particularly. I mean, a lot of clients are just focused on, I'll be honest, you spend less time. If you're doing design work, you're in the field of CIBSE and the IET, but if you're involved in professional reporting, it tends to be all about leases and what the RICS say and all those sorts of things, which is more property speak. And so I wouldn't say I'm disappointed, but to some extent you're in the throes of how long a lease is and how much money somebody wants to throw at some property in order to make it lettable. And to some extent, I mean, obviously we sort of try and fly the sustainability flag, but to some extent it does help to sell a property, and in other cases they're just not too bothered.
So there's quite a few 3-letter acronyms in the world of M&E building services, I guess. Communicating to quantity surveyors and solicitors and legal jargon, as you mentioned earlier, is a whole different level. Yeah,
they've all got their own acronyms, haven't they? They've all got their own setters, so we're always interested in what does all that mean. But yeah, they're all dying to know how come heat pumps are like more than 100% efficient, and Why do I need ventilation? Why do I need to pay for that?
The one that I struggled with recently was IRS being an information required schedule and simultaneously an information release schedule.
Right.
So one
Yeah,
is asking a question and the other one's
there's always-
telling somebody when they're going to get it or when they can expect it. So I was talking in one term and the person that I was speaking with was talking in another term, totally at cross purposes, and
yeah,
missed each other. And
yeah.
it
That's
wasn't
the
until,
danger, isn't it?
yeah. Any interesting conundrums like that with legals and building services speak at cross purposes?
Yeah, we always try and sort of speak it out in fully first rather than just get into the acronyms, because that's the danger. Is very much you feel, you've only got to hear it once, and I'll ask and write it down because, as you say, occasionally one doesn't come to mind, but it has happened a few times where you just think, no, they don't mean what we mean. Surely they don't mean that. So yeah, and as you say, when you ask, oh, it means this, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, it is always interesting. It's a different field, and you can always learn more about your own field, but it's interesting to sort of branch into other people's stuff. It gives you a broader aspect of why the clients, sometimes they are very interested in the services. Say, especially if it sells the deal, as it were, or it's trying to kill the deal. But other times it's of interest to see what drives them. Is it pounds per square foot or whatever it is?
So do you work primarily for people looking to sell their buildings or looking to purchase buildings?
Both.
Okay.
And some people aren't, they're looking to sort of, if a business is cash, you come to realise when a business is cash rich, they'll buy their own property, and then, because obviously property just goes up and up and up, sort of thing, doesn't it, generally? And then when they're not so cash rich, they may sell it and lease it back, and that's a tax efficient way to hold on to it, and then later they may buy it back. Some quite a while ago, just when we were in COVID, a big business, Next, I can say it because it's in the public domain. Next did a sale and lease back on their HQ in Leicester, and it was interesting. That's quite a place. They've got their own sort of internal shops and all sorts of things. It's an amazing place. Yeah. So I mean, there are quite a few places like that. I mean, it's hard to discuss the others because a lot of them are subject to NDAs, and some of them don't come out into the public.
Well,
But,
there's a
when they do.
three-letter acronym that our listeners might not be familiar with. So
Oh, right,
NDA
right.
is?
An NDA is a non-disclosure agreement, and they can be, if you're involved in a deal, we're involved in deals at the moment where they don't want the person who's buying or selling or financing doesn't want it to be out on the market because it could affect some businesses' share price or something. Or it could be, as I did one survey in Nottingham, and we had to sign an NDA just to walk in and walk around, and they were only the tenants, but
Wow.
they were building software. And so they definitely didn't want anybody sort of looking at a screen and picking something up. They don't know who you are. They don't know what. Let's get rid of that. They don't know what capability you've got when you read one of their screens. So this you sign an NDA. So
Well,
it can, sometimes it's really nothing, and other times it's a big deal.
yeah, photographic memories going around as a undercover agent working for the competitor.
If only that were the case, yeah. But obviously, when you tell them you're not really interested in their business, they sort of, oh, why not? Why wouldn't you be interested? Well, it's like, it's nothing to do with us. We don't care. We're just looking at the heating.
Well, yeah, you're interested in the lights and the fire
Yeah,
alarm and the sprinkler
exactly. Yeah,
systems.
all the services, but they're just like, oh, really? Oh, okay. Yeah.
So
I,
how'd you get into the industry?
It's funny, I sort of read the questionnaire, and it does make me think back. I mean, it's been a long time. I mean, I'm not young by any means, so it was a long time ago now. When I was in my early to mid-teens, and one of our youth club leaders at the time, he mentioned it to me. I think my parents said, "Oh, I'm not particularly an academic." So the chap's name is Tom Watts, and he's long since retired, but he worked for a contractor, big design build contractor at the time. I think it was Wiseman Woodward, and they're long since gone. And he later became a consultant. But yeah, he took me out to a job that he was working on, and we had a quick look around site, and looked at the drawings and the sort of things you have to do, you know, calculations and communication, all those sorts of things. And I thought, yeah, it was a job for me. So yeah, from there I applied. There was a sort of, I think they still do it. There's a CITB test, which was taken at Intersection House, which, as you know, was the home of Howe Group, and loads of us turned up there. We all took the test, and then I think there's some kind of combined sort of hat where Howe Group took so many, and then Brightsides took some others, and then Haden's took some others, and Crown House, and all the big players, which there were quite a few then, and obviously they've sort of bought each other out since.
All apprentices and grads and trainees, and
yeah, there were craft apprentices and technical apprentices. Yeah, technical apprentices were in the office, and they started out doing a bit of tracing on, you know, literally before CAD. This was sort of hard copy papers with rotring pens and things, and it didn't last. I mean, it was only so many years afterwards. Up, and I finished my apprenticeship, I packed those pens away. I thought one day I'll clean those pens and then make sure they're ready for another day. And then literally, I threw them away in the end, because you just don't do it. I mean, somebody bought me a
compass protractor.
No, a slide rule.
Okay.
When I was at school, one of my birthdays, they bought me a slide rule. And of course, even before I left school, the Casio calculator was there, and everybody was buying them. I mean, they're the same price then as they are now, I think. But yeah, I've got a slide rule. I don't know how to use it. Never used it. Just seen it used in films about NASA or something. So yeah, how things move on. But it did make me wonder, because when I recently I had to do a pre-acquisition down in London on the Clapham Road. And it was right where I started as an apprentice. What Haden's used to do was, obviously they sent you to college on day release, but because you would have took quite some time on that basis to become useful to them, they used to send you away on a full-time 4-week course. And in that course, you'd learn heat losses, heat gains, pipe sizing, pipe loading, you know, an appreciation of all things M&E, and that was down on the Clapham Road, which has since it's gone now. And this building I was doing this report on was literally next to where there are a load of sort of apartments there now. But this was Haden's London stores, and where they had the classrooms for teaching people all this sort of stuff. So that's how we got into the industry, really.
And so no formal qualifications or anything along those lines. I guess it's all on the job learning and experience.
Well, it started off that way. I mean, I later did a day release degree at Hatfield, which obviously at the time most people were doing the degree full time at Newcastle or Southbank. So I went to it was Hatfield and St Albans College, which quite a few people in the industry. I think it's the course has stopped now, but it's replaced by the Coventry one. So yeah, I went there for 4 years, day release, and got the degree. So I started that with Geoffrey Wilkinson, and then when they closed the Birmingham office, so I moved to National Design Consultancy, Royal Mail.
And that was your first role?
Yeah, so yeah, I sort of moved up then from, I mean, I was already sort of working at senior level, so I became a senior engineer there, running project, you know, doing design work, start to finish, really taking the brief, design work, developing the tender documents, running the CAD team for what you needed, and then working with other seniors. So yeah.
And working with seniors, working with juniors, is there anybody that you'd like to acknowledge that's helped you along the way?
Yeah, again, yeah, you sort of having read that question, I thought over time, I just thought, oh yeah, there was so and so. So a couple of people who really stand out. One was Paul Vickers, who I think again is recently retired, but he went on to be a partial owner of NDC. It was sold out of Royal Mail, privatised. So himself and John Griffiths, they sort of helped me develop and built my sort of application for chartered status. So thanks to them for that, really. And then as a general, gone.
Yes, right. Sorry, I interrupted.
I was going to say, just as a person who generally helped me along was Keith Eccleston, which is a name sort of in the recent past. He's not long left the industry, and well, passed away unfortunately. But yeah, he was around. He was a previous chairman numerous times, and yeah, he helped a lot of people.
And you're currently in the role as Keith was previous chair. This is your second time within the West Midlands Committee and currently in the role of secretary.
Yeah, it's much sought after role. It certainly used to be quite of the people that I recall being the sort of heads of the industry, people like Terry Dix and Andy Singleton and all those sorts, and Garth Payton and all those sorts of people. Being the secretary was quite a big thing. So, but I think at the time it involved more communications because it was sort of a printed letter was sent out every month and stuff. And obviously, we've rather moved on.
or a fax.
Yeah, well, yeah, and then fax, and then I guess you can move to email. And now we're sort of we're in the throes of portals and LinkedIn, and there are so many channels of communication, aren't there? I don't know how we sort of you've got to monitor so many. There's WhatsApp groups sending stuff out, and then there's Facebook, LinkedIn, all those things. So
yeah. Any STEM activities?
No, not directly. No. I mean, I do sort of look at it on things like YouTube and stuff like that. And I've got two daughters who are in their early teens, and I'm always sort of pushing them to sort of look, come and look at this. I mean, the way our eldest daughter's relatively interested, but my youngest daughter, her interests are not sort of focused on maths, physics, and whatever. She's more into art and history. So each to his own. So,
and how do you see the role of engineering and engineering's changed over the past year or so?
It has, yeah. I still think that in order to drive the industry, you really do need to put it down in statute. Only when it's in statute will people really take note of it. And even then, if you look at the amount of when buildings are sold or bought and they don't have air conditioning inspection reports or they don't have EPCs.
F-gas?
Well, F-gas, yeah, you're kidding. Some of them, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of people out there who are really, they've done it to death. You ask for it and it's just got, there you go, it's on the portal, there you go, all done. And other places like, well, we didn't feel we needed that because, what's the risk? They're only civil issues, so they can only put a fine on you. £5,000 fine is the maximum you can be done for. But obviously, good solicitors, when push comes to shove, all these things have to be in place. The only thing is obviously the next phase with MEs and EPCs is that we're now going to move from an F or a G being unacceptable to the next level is I think the next requirement is a C
or a D, isn't it?
C or a D.
Yeah.
So that's going to affect the industry. I mean, although you can sort of claim a dispensation, it's still not going to be brilliant when you're trying to market a building that it's not got proper EPC.
And just talk us through EPCs. What does a EPC demonstrate or show somebody?
Well, when they first came out, they were back in the mid 2000s. The building regulations was altered, and that required you to have a thermal model built, which the original model was, I think, it was written by FHPESS and then QA'd by Garratts. I'm sure somebody will come back to me on the comments about this, but. And so that was built as it initially started out as the SBEM, the Simplified Building Energy Model, and then various third parties such as IESV and all those other parties, TAS, all those, they built their own version of it based on the same algorithm, which is good. So what you've got is the SBEM is in the building regulations. So in order to get through the building regs, if you're doing a new build or new work, you need to do that thermal model to prove that what you're doing is up to the acceptable standard, particularly in terms of U values or overheating, those sorts of things.
That's the thermal performance of the building fabric, the outer skin, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So largely it started out traditionally about, well, these buildings need to be efficient because obviously we live in the cold or for 6 or 8 months of the year, so these places need to be thermally efficient so to avoid heat loss. But unfortunately, what has happened with changes in climate is that heat is coming for a longer period. It's warmer for a longer period, it's hotter, and so now you see with higher levels of insulation you can unfortunately achieve overheating, and that leads you either need to cool it to get it out, or you need to ventilate it out to some extent. So those are the sort of balances that are occurring. But in terms of going back to what we said about EPCs and the MEs, an energy performance certificate is based on the same SBEM model, and that's really at the end of a new build job, you have to have an EPC in place. So usually it's, if you've already done the SBEM model to get past building regulations, it's a very simple press of a button, software button effectively, to create your EPC. But the EPC has to be registered on the government portal.
And that indicates how efficiently a building operates under given conditions.
It is based on the design. Although it needs to be, before it is issued, it needs to be checked that what was designed at, say, tender stage is what was installed, because obviously you do get value engineering occur, various changes. So the EPC is based on what was installed, but is associated with the design and the theoretical efficiency of the building, as opposed to a deck, which was a display energy certificate, which again based on a similar function, but that was based on the maintenance and the operation of the building, and it was going to be rolled out, and some private sector companies who are relatively hot on sustainability did start using it, and it did show, based on fuel bills, etc., it did show how efficient the buildings were being run. It was only you're only required to provide it on public sector buildings, and at that time it was every year, but over time what's happened is as I say, the private sector don't tend to use it anymore. They didn't have to use it, so they don't use it, and the public sector only have to do it every 5 years now, so it sort of fell by the wayside, which is a bit of a shame, and it would be good if that came back.
Do you think that prospective buyers of buildings, or prospective buyers, take the EPC results into consideration in their numbers, and comparing one building with another? So one may be more expensive but have a better EPC rating, which then means the operational expenditure will be less, compared to another building which is cheaper but costs more to run.
Yeah, I think the more informed clients, they do take it on board. As you say, you probably paid more per square foot for a well-engineered, sustainable building, but the cost in use should be lower. The thermal losses are lower, the equipment based on that should be smaller, therefore the running costs are lower, and so it is horses for courses. So one way or another, you perhaps pay less on your fuel bills but more on the rent, but hopefully, because the equipment should be smaller, then your rental charge is reduced in that respect. And
what about net zero carbon?
Yeah, I heard you mention that on another interview, and it is quite difficult to sort of, I mean, people argue about where net zero is, and what it is, but obviously I think that, to me, it's all about the thrust towards net zero, and so it's about really making sure that equipment that's selected is appropriate, and if you can, I mean, I think the building regs have been revised, and they've now arrived at a condition where the heating and the domestic hot water is as efficient as it can be, but we're now looking at, I think what we should have looked at towards the start really, which is the passive measures, where once you've built a building and it's really well insulated, then the plant selections are smaller. And as you say, you need to do less work. You need to do less to heat it, less to cool it, and that should have been from the start really.
By plants, you're talking about fans and boilers and light fittings rather than any trees or shrubberies or greenery.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. Obviously, I've been starting to get into engineering mode here, but yeah, plant is just generic engineering services equipment.
Yeah. So fans and
fans, heat pumps, boilers.
Yeah,
it's quite
cooling
funny actually.
units.
Somebody asked me the other day, when was the last time I selected a boiler? And I was like, I'm really trying to think when we last did that.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
So just a few random questions, just getting to know you a bit better. Proudest moment in your life?
I don't know. I'm not sure it would be to do with work, really. I mean, it'd probably be when the children are born or something. So,
and work-wise, is there a particular project that sticks out that you're proud of?
There have been a number of projects. So I was quite proud of when I worked for White Young Green. They went through quite a bit of turmoil, which was all sort of to do with their boardroom scraps and people coming and going and having to be recovered by the banks and various other things. But I think they're in quite good waters now. But at the time, it was this is 20 odd years ago. We were doing a job called Glacier Van der Velde bearings, and they were a British bearings company, and they were bought out by Dana, which is a very large, very large American corporation who make bearings, suspension equipment, all sorts of things for cars. They're one of the big sort of players in the background. If you were Jaguar or somebody and you needed suspension parts, then you go to Dana and they sell you by the million sort of thing. So they bought Dana Glacier Van der Velde and they moved them from an old accommodation to a new location in Rugby, and we built it. It was quite palatial at the front with at the time it was in vogue was very high ceilings and displacement ventilation. That was very good. And then at the back they had engine test cells, bearing test cells, and all sorts of workshops and things. So it was quite a building. And, I was quite proud of that. It was relatively an expensive build. They weren't too fussed about the cost. So there was a bit of value engineering, but not loads by any means. And it was really interesting to see. I mean, Dana is now Glacier Van der Velde. They sell engine bearings to BMW. So it's the bearings that go in the 4-cylinder engines, I think it is, that go to Coleshill. Those were British bearings, which was quite an eye opener. But yeah, it was quite an interesting building, and the services we had to adapt. Everything was in there. There was offices, cellular offices, say engine test cells, laboratories, metallurgy laboratories, all sorts of things. So it was all there. Yeah.
And what's the biggest either value and or square meterage project that you've been involved with? 6 football fields worth, or scout hut sort of thing?
Yeah, it just depended in terms of design. I mean, Glacier Van der Velde was fairly big. I think I've done one or two bigger than that. I can't recall the names, but I mean, of late, when we're doing financial reporting or technical reporting, it's not just a building. I mean, I did some recently which were in Tamworth, and they were huge. They were probably, I don't know, around 1 million square foot or something. But these days you get involved particularly if you're subconsulting to larger firms. It's not just one building. It's sometimes not just one estate. It could be like 50 estates. So suddenly you've got like it's 6 weeks work for all three of us. Let's crack on.
And that's all working remote or getting out and on site and walking around and taking note of
out on site. Yeah. So
So looking at fan plates and motor ratings and plant equipment
Yeah,
dates and
we tend to use our sort of methodologies. If you're required to go out on site, then you go out on site and you make the most of it. You grab as much information as you can, and obviously these days the Apple iPhone is here, and you know, if you sit, particularly if you set it on low battery, that's my hint of the my hint for the days. Set as soon as you charge it, set it on low use, and you can get sort of 1,200 photos a day out of it. So that's, you know, we gather as much information as possible, and then it's when you come back, it's each client that we work for, they've got their own sort of what they call levels of materiality and things they focus on, and it depends how much they're spending effectively. Yeah, if you're buying one building, you want to know all about it. If you're buying a whole estate, you probably want to know a bit less about it. If you're buying 50 or 100 estates, then you just want to see what's the trend, what's going on with these buildings, what's going to happen in the next 5 years, 10 years. And obviously our thing is when you're in those sorts of timings of reports, then there are the issues around the HFC phase down. You know, our 404A is already sort of gone, and the next will be on, you know, 134A, you know, 410A, and how do we move on to R32 or whatever we're going to use next.
and those are all different types of refrigerant gases used in the heating and cooling systems predominantly, yeah?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, 134 R410A and 134A are the mainstays of the industry, and they have been for best part of 20 years, and they're very good, but obviously they've got problems with global warming, etc. They're better than the predecessors, which were R22 and R11, and people have used others, and I'm sure some refrigerant engineer will put me right in terms of, you know, their blends, and one was better because but now that even HFCs aren't good enough, we need to move on. Then these refrigerant manufacturers are able to look at all sorts, whether they go back to ammonia, or do they use something like R32, which is a mixture of, which essentially is camping gas, which is butane and propane. They're sort of looking at any material which can be usefully used as a refrigerant, whilst obviously trying to save the atmosphere.
Yeah, yeah, there's plenty of opportunities there for any engineer or aspiring engineer to get involved with the sustainability pieces and renewables and energy efficiency and innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing is, you know, you see you know, a lot of discussion on the news, etc., and it's all really high level. When you come down to it, a lot of these things, I say, either statute drives it or money drives it. To some extent, you know, things like PVs on roofs, there's still a lot of scope there to get more of that on. Windmills, not so much. I don't think they just don't cost in. But having said that, obviously at large scale, the prices really come down. So I'm sort of quite impressed that you know, 10 or more years ago, the price of windmills, particularly offshore, was so expensive, and now it's by volume, literally, it's come. You know, the unit rate has come down, and so we're quite a reasonable proportion of energy generation is by sustainable means.
Yeah,
Wind or PVs. I still think I've been keeping my eye on hydrogen and the use of hydrogen, and I still think it's got a part to play. I do think electric cars are probably here for now, but quite how long, I don't know how long they'll last, to be honest. I don't know how much lithium there is in the ground. Unfortunately, we're using lithium like it's going out of fashion, and unfortunately it can't be recovered. I understand once it's been oxidized into a lithium ion battery, you can't recover it, so it's a one-way ticket on lithium. So that will start to get more expensive and eventually become too expensive to use. So that's when we'll be back to hydrogen. I don't know if you've seen the YouTube video by Lord Bamford of JCB, but he's well worth a watch. His equipment, obviously JCBs, you know, he sells a lot of them, and unfortunately they tried making them, electrifying them, and it just doesn't work. The power density in the lithium-ion batteries isn't there. So you can only use it for a couple of hours before you need to charge it. In order to get your money back on the equipment, they need to be working either at least the smaller equipment, at least a day's worth, and the larger equipment needs to be working sort of 16 hours a day to make it pay, worth its investment. So their methodologies, they've literally sort of converted diesel engines to high pressure hydrogen.
Yeah, and biofuels as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I think for large equipment and power dense equipment, trains, JCBs, trucks, that sort of stuff, that's definitely the way to go. Possibly on cars as well. You wouldn't have perhaps wouldn't have the range anxiety and the fill up time that you need. But as I say, it is improving on electric cars. It's for the now, it's the way to go.
Yeah. What advice would you give to somebody wanting to pursue a career similar to yours?
I think it's, we've spoken about it before about the amount of people in the industry seem to be dropping away. I think I see, my own sons have passed through university, and I've seen other people's kids going to university, and you do worry that, they're doing a degree and to some extent they're not necessarily getting best value. Whereas if you were to go, particularly if you're not academic, you may find it's better to go on day release or block release to college, spend some time at work, earn some money, earn while you learn. And then if you do feel that you're capable or you're getting good, reasonable grades, then you can either do full-time or day release degree, and see how you go from there.
Yeah.
So
what do you think the future holds for building services engineers?
I think building services is key. It's key, working with the architects or building surveyors and working with QSs. It's key to making sure that, I think the thing is with engineers, they tend to try to optimize to the perfect version of something, whatever it be. But sometimes that's the right thing to do. Other times it just needs to be to a certain level, because you need to build in a level of flexibility. And that means instead of going for the optimum, you just pull back slightly. But then you've achieved a level of flexibility so that change can occur. And the thing is with accommodation these days, you used to build buildings to last 100 years, but you can build a building today, particularly a large building, and it could be broken up and sublet 10 years later or 20 years later.
Yeah.
So you do have to try and, to some extent, allow for that change to occur.
Yeah, it's having that knowledge and crystal ball, future prediction piece as to it's probably going to be this, but it might be this, and let's do it this way because all things considered, it has that element in there of the flexibility there.
Yeah, that's what we, in our reports, a lot of them are, maybe it's an acquisition or you're selling it as a vendor's survey, but a lot of them do ask for a bit of a piece on that very subject. What could we do if we wanted to break it down into parts, or we wanted to do something else with it? What flexibility have you got in the incoming services or the electrical infrastructure?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Good. Well, thank you very much for joining us today and sharing what you have. Just a couple of last questions, if I may. What do you like to do in your spare time?
It's possibly a bit predictable, but yeah, some gardening, some time with my kids. I've got a bicycle, or a number of bicycles, so I like a bit of cycling, and I've got a motorcycle, so I like a bit of motorcycling as well. So
number of bicycles, how many have you got?
I've got one mountain bike and one road bike.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And a touring motorbike or a sports bike, or?
It's a combination of the two. It's a bit of a sports tourer. So it's what, all things to all men really. It's relative. It's really quick. I'll never get to the top speed, that's for sure. But it's quite comfortable.
On the public roads, officer.
Yes, exactly. I just don't think, I think the top speed is something like 160 miles an hour. I don't think even on a track, on a good day, a dry day, a good day, I still don't think I'd be able to get it up to that kind of speed. But it's great. It's really, the advantage of driving something like that, it's very comfortable, and it still really does handle. But at the same time, if you take it up to relatively high speeds, it's still well within its capability. So there's still plenty on the suspension and the brakes, and yeah, you'll never run out of performance. It's the driver who's going to run out of performance first, really.
Yeah, the talent. And where can people discover more about you or interact?
Obviously, we've got our website, tdd-consult.com, so you can ask us a question there if you like. We're also on LinkedIn, just under our personal names and under the corporate name TDD Consult. So that's where we are, really. I do look at other platforms, but I just think, yeah, we'd spend all our time, if we're not careful, we'll spend all our time sort of passing out tweets or something instead of getting some work done.
Yeah, excellent. Well, as I said previously, thank you very much for joining and sharing with us what you have today. If anybody watching or listening would like to share their thoughts with us, please don't hesitate to do so. Also, if you'd like to feature in a future episode, or know of or can think of somebody that you'd like to find out more about, or is an inspiration to you, please get in touch. Please like, comment and share, and we look forward to the next episode of the CIBSE West Midlands Region vlog and podcast. Thank you, Geoff.
Cheers, Josh. Thanks.